So we are starting today our seminar on business law, which is the last seminar before, my dear friends, you go for the exam. And here with me today is Lindsey, who is our successful grad from the last sitting. She's also LPC grad for those who are interested in comparison, in regard to SQE versus LPC. So my congratulations, Lindsey, with your success.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very happy, relieved.
Yeah, just as a starting point, what's your impression of the assessment in general terms?
Yeah, I thought it was good. It was challenging, but it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. It was very much, if you sort of look at the exam questions that they supply you, everything was sort of what I expected it to be. The oral assessments were over the 2 days, and they were very well run, and it was small groups. So I very much thought that went really well.
Did they apply any COVID related measures, or
no, there was no COVID related measures. There was quite a bit of waiting around between sittings and things like that over the 2 days. The actual amount of time that you spend doing the assessment is not particularly long. It's more the gaps in between. And for the written assessments, that's quite a lot of information in a short period of time. It is a long exam, so you get a short break, but you're really sort of using your brain for that morning or afternoon, dependent on what you have. So I definitely say that was a bit more tiring, and to do that each day. So one of the things I found useful for the written exams that I think that sort of helped is not trying to do too much in the afternoons. And that helped me relax, because you sort of, by that point, you've got an information overload. And I find that you end up focusing too much on specific law and technical stuff. And then that can be quite overwhelming, rather than just taking a step back, having a breather, and sort of just thinking about how you thought the exam went in terms of even technical things, how you think you could use the system better to your advantage. There's not much technical capabilities for the system, things like that. And also where you think that you missed something, or you didn't do so well. I found spending that time in the afternoon thinking more about things like that, and how to approach the next day better, timing, or things like that you often discuss with exams, that helped me stay quite calm.
You need to have some rest, right? It's very important, because
it is a lot. Sort of taking a step back again and sort of thinking about it more in a practical sense, as if I was talking to a friend or a work colleague, and tackling it that way in a more sort of professional practice way than you're sitting there and doing an exam. I found that meant that I took a more holistic, high level view, was able to structure it a bit better, and I think that was helpful.
Oh, great. So it's not just about knowledge, my friend. It's also about making a break, and you thinking about how to be more effective in the exam, knowing already what happened today. It's may bring you more than overwhelming revision and reading and rereading again and again. If we compare, we have some people with LPC background. If we compare LPC sort of level of tasks and skills with SQE, obviously SQE is of a higher standard, but just for people to understand, what is the difference in your opinion? Anything in this regard that may be helpful for others?
In terms of comparison, I think it's quite similar. I found it quite similar, the structure and kind of what's expected, applying the law to identifying the legal principles, applying the law to the facts and things. I found it very similar, and it reminded me of the LPC. I think The difference, I would say, is a bit more in the skills assessment. It felt like it concentrated a lot more on the skills and how you sort of presented stuff. But I definitely think that it's very similar. A bit more skill based. It reminded me more of practice than the LPC. The LPC seemed to very much evolve out of coming from the sort of I did the GDL, so that process actually reminds me of the SQE1 as the GDL and the SQE2 as the LPC.
Yeah.
And it very much similarly goes along with that. So I think that, having done the LPC, it definitely mirrors very similarly with the SQE2. And I think that it not as surprising as you would think. I mean, I did the LPC a little while ago. So I found brushing up on the law was important for me as well, to just make sure that you have that confidence in technical sort of knowledge and legal principles and things. But very similar.
Great. I'll now share the screen. And maybe you'll help me with some last tips.
Lindsey, may I ask a quick question? Maybe just at the time. Yeah.
So thank you very much.
What do you think the most challenging assessment or assessments, and any tips you apply and then you think very helped?
The most challenging, out of all the assessments, I was most, because I don't really do litigation or oral advocacy. I thought that was the interviewing and oral was going to be really bad and really challenging, but it actually wasn't. That was quite straightforward. And I definitely think the legal research was a lot of information. Practicing them and sort of taking that large chunks of information and being able to discern what's important, and it was quite technical. So the legal research, it was quite a lot of information to sort of it wasn't simple articles or simple cases. It was a lot more information to digest and sift through. So the most challenging one, I found the legal research. With that one, I mean, it's doing the mock exams on legal research. I definitely say to do them, just to practice taking in that information. The other thing with the legal research that made it challenging was the system. I'm used to, I was saying to Olga, used to double screens and being able to sort of throw things around on a computer where I can cross-read. Having the challenge of only really being able to read one thing at a time, I found ate into a little bit of my time because it wasn't how I normally conduct my legal research. So practicing using the system would help with the legal research, and just really practicing doing the mock exams.
Okay, thank you.
Moving further to our last tips for today, I think it's super important. That's what you've mentioned, that people should have a rest, and a little bit, it may give you much more than actually the last revision. But at the same time, also to take it easy. It's not the end of the world. And you have many more attempts, like 2 more attempts in any way. So how did you actually cope with the stress? How was it from that point of view? Any sort of tips in this regard?
Yeah, the same thing. Reiterate what I said before, and is sort of taking that downtime. There's a lot going on and there's a lot of information that you're sort of trying to commandeer. Take a step back. The other thing that I mentioned to you earlier, that depending on people's experience, and I don't know, but if you've worked in a law firm or you've been given tasks, I found that treating it almost like work was useful for me because it took the exam pressure off. And I tackled it a bit better because I sort of imagined that this was an email that someone had sent me. How would I in reality actually tackle this? And I think that built my confidence and took the stress away. So, and I mean, that's not reading and that's not sort of revising, that's sort of just adjusting your mind frame to sort of stay calm and treat it as if it's a sort of, for me, it worked, a real life sort of scenario, time. But yeah, definitely I see you've got, brief revision notes. There was some concepts that I definitely thought it just helped to have little cards to sort of refresh my memory on. In the morning, I used to revise right up until the exam, and then as soon as the other one was finished, I was right back down. And I think there's just a lot going on here, that it's just taking at least a couple of hours after the exams just to calm down. You know, you get told it time and time again, get a good night's sleep. It's not easy when you've but make sure, you know, if you're not one of them people that can sleep right sort of the night before exam, it feels a bit like a horrible Christmas, do it at the weekend and make sure that you're resting coming up to it, so you have that fuel reserve that you can kind of run off a little bit of adrenaline, and you don't want to wear yourself out for, you know, the last one where it is just the business law. So yeah, rest, sort of a deep breath, and try and tackle it practically and rationally, rather than getting intimidated by the fact that it's an assessment and an exam, which can just end up throwing you off.
So indeed, you can imagine that you are actually working, that it's your real work, and that would be something helpful. I think at some point I had such a feeling too, especially when the advocacy was concerned. I was very stressed, and at some point I said to myself, "Oh, it's like I'm in the court. I know how to do that," and I really imagined it was a usual thing to do. So thanks, it's a great tip. Did you experience any disruption, I don't know, by means of, for example, when I passed the exam, everyone's typing in the second part, written part of the assessment was crazy. People started to type, I think, as soon as the questions were released. How do you feel about that? How did you?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I think it affects people differently. They did provide headphones, just them little squishy ones that you used to get on planes. I actually didn't use them for the first day, but did for the second and third, and it just took a little bit of the edge off. So I felt a bit silly at first, but I'd say that use them. They're there for a reason, and if they're not comfortable, then don't. But don't just ignore them. Give them a bit of a go, because it will take a bit of the clatter away. I would ignore what everyone else is doing, because you know, I sort of took the time and I didn't feel any pressure to type. I wanted to do it, think about the structure, take in the information. Some people, everybody operates differently. That's how I work. Some people can just go straight run of it and start tapping. I think everyone's different and they operate differently. So I wouldn't be concerned about what everyone else is doing. And till the last moment, you can hear claps. But yeah, use the headphones, try and just focus on what you're doing. And it wasn't, I think the key tapping was as loud because everything else was quite quiet. So I didn't find the center very loud or particularly distracting. You're sort of in these little cubicles, and there was only about 6 of us in my particular sitting. So yeah, I didn't find it too bad, but I definitely suggest giving them a go.
All right. Did you struggle with anything? Did you need any assistance of any invigilator? I don't know, anything from that point of view, maybe some tips?
No, I didn't, but I also did spend a lot of time using the practice system. So there was no issues with the setup. They had everything running. I think we had a 5-minute delay at one point while they tried to get some of the computers working. It's pretty straightforward. You sort of just got to click through a few acknowledgements, and I didn't have any system issues, but I know some people struggled with using the platform itself. It's not necessarily the most user friendly, and I'd say if you're I think we mentioned earlier, if you're tech savvy, that can feel like quite a regression. It's simple, it works, but if you're used to sort of doing a lot of shortcuts and things like that, I definitely say, if you haven't already, take the time to look at the capabilities and make sure that you utilize it the most effective as possible. That sort of stops a few people were asking questions about how to do certain things, and I didn't need to do that because I'd looked at the system a couple of times.
Yeah, but there's just very basic shortcuts, same as we use. Control A, like to highlight everything, and paste, copy, and basic. It's quite, but friends, please check it, because the exam is so much time framed. So every second is an opportunity to insert some answer, you know. So this is a huge thing. Just the last question, what about the last period, like our students just are 2 weeks from the assessment? So how would you recommend to structure this 2-3 weeks?
I would definitely say mocks. I mean, we got into this because I used the one-on-ones, and I found, especially for advocacy and interviewing, I found them tremendously helpful, and it takes some of the edge off. So if you have the opportunity and the capability to do them, it sort of takes a bit of the shock of, oh, someone's assessing me, and it takes a little bit of that extra edge off. I spent my last couple of weeks doing a lot of mocks, even ones that I'd done before. I tried to do again, and just tuning in them skills of identifying the information. I mean, you're not going to remember all of the law, but if you have a good approach to the questions and you're practicing them skills, so mocks for me. And I also just spent a couple of sort of an hour or so every day, just sort of looking through some material and things like that, and just refreshing my knowledge overall, but then focusing on specific questions, and then a few flashcards. What I found is people tend to do the flashcards, in my opinion, a bit early, where they end up, by the end of it, from doing all the study, you tend to know a few topics quite easily. It's only there's only like 3 or 4 flashcards you end up in your hand at the end of study, I find, that actually is stuff that you haven't ingested. So a couple of key ones, a couple of key flashcards, a little bit of a sort of read through of all the material on a consistent basis, and then definitely the predominant amount of time I found mocks were useful.
Mm-hmm. I did make super concise notes just to recap on everything and put everything in a single system. So I made like 1 page per subject, sometimes both sides, A4. Something can also, some people find it useful, because it's like, it's not actually about that you have it, it's about that you make it. So when you make it, sort of revise everything, like with the flashcards, same. I think we have a question. How many one-to-one mocks did you do? Other than one-to-one mocks, did you do other mocks before? Others, like...
So I did I think
I don't remember how many.
No, it's okay. I did one for each of the case matter analysis, the legal research. I picked different subjects, but I picked each one. So I did a mock on everything, and I picked different subjects. I felt more confident about criminal because I'd done a similar degree, but I actually I did one on criminal and one on civil because they felt a bit different. So yeah, I chose to do one of each. I think I might have done 2 civil on the advocacy point, but yeah, one of each in each subject, and then sort of picked other subjects that out of the 2 or so that I didn't feel like I was confident. I got other mocks from I looked at the SQE sample questions at the beginning to get an idea of what they were asking, but I also redid them particular ones at the end, closer to the time, because I felt that they were the ones that were most and then I did the QLTS course, and I had some of their mock questions, but I found that OSCEsmart's mock questions were actually better reflective of the exams, super comprehensive, and the material was definitely much more along the lines of the assessment than the ones that I had done with another provider.
Quick question. Regarding the difficulty of the exam and comparison to our mock questions, we have it long, it's like long time question. In the beginning, when we started the course, everyone complained that it was super much more difficult than the actual exam, and then it slowly went down. And for the moment, in your opinion, are our mocks more difficult than the actual exam, or they are not, or whatever?
They're a little bit more difficult than the exam. I definitely say that they prepare you. I wasn't as shocked or surprised by some of the things that was how it was presented. The material, I think, yeah, it's a little bit harder, I think, than what I got given.
The exam becomes more and more difficult, and there have been people who applied for SQE2 exemption, but now they have to pass the SQE1, and I already know many who failed SQE1. So this exam SQE is more difficult possibly than QLTS was to some extent. But what to do? It's a part of our journey. And again, you don't have to score 100. You need just to pass. Be rational, be pragmatic, cherish yourself. Your energy is super important. And this is a long marathon. So it depends when exactly your exam is booked and what is the gap between written and oral part. But I think like 10 days in a row of exams, like even with a break, but you revise constantly, you live in the stress. So never forget that you still have the last days of the exam, because some people are so much tired. So during those days, they actually a little bit not that attentive or prepared. In your opinion, which area of law is the most challenging exam-wise?
I'd say they all have different aspects for me. Civil is a lot of information, although it follows quite a logical structure. So although it was a lot of information, it was a bit easier to digest if you follow the sort of like the court system and the principles. Again, is a lot of information, and I found that even though I've sort of worked some corporate and things like that, I found that needed a bit of extra time, and not because just it's the last day to sort of have that theory you've got a little bit more time because it's just a night in between. So yeah, I'd say civil and business. Civil just because of the quantity, I think business because of the quantity, and some of it's a lot of information that you need to know.